The next time you're at the Dollar Tree, head down the aisle with the plates and dishes. Grab yourself some of these round chargers and also some of the rectangular chargers. I'm going to show you how I use them for crafts and DIYs to decorate my home, and also how I use them to organize my home. Before I get started with the crafts, I just want to let you know that anytime you see me painting one of these chargers, I wiped it down with rubbing alcohol first. This is just to help get any dust and debris off of it, and from different people picking them up, there's a lot of oils on them from our hands. So I always like to clean them really well before I start painting. One thing I can always find at the Dollar Tree are these round mirrors. Now on their own, they're kind of plain and they're a little bit small, but when you pair them with a charger, it makes them a lot bigger and it gives them more interest. There are quite a few different types of styles of chargers, but I really liked this one because I liked the scalloped edge that it had around the outside. I wanted to paint both the mirror and the charger so that they would be the same color. The mirror is put together with just 3 screws. There's 2 screws on the back, and then there's a 3rd screw that actually has a hanger with it, and these were really simple to remove. I just used a screwdriver and I was able to take everything apart, and that way I can just paint the frame and I don't have to worry about getting paint on the mirror itself. Anytime I'm painting something plastic, I always have the best luck either using spray paint or chalk paint. For this piece, I'm going to use some blue chalk paint, but you can paint it any color you'd like. For the first coat, I'm just going in with a brush and I'm just brushing all over the surfaces of both my charger and the frame to my mirror. After the first coat dried completely, you could still see a lot of the brush strokes. So what I like to do for the second coat is I just take my brush and I pounce it up and down the same way that you would do it if you were using a stencil. I'm just going straight up and down on my plate. This will add a little bit of texture to both pieces, and it'll also help blend away those brush strokes. After my second coat had a chance to dry, I'm going in with some of the Rub and Buff in the antique gold. And because this charger has so much texture to it with the scalloped edge, I just want to show that off a little bit more. I always like to apply the Rub and Buff with my hands. I feel like I can just get it a little more precise that way. So you can see here, anywhere there was a raised edge on this plate, I just added some of the Rub and Buff to it to show off those areas. And then I applied a little bit on the frame to the mirror too, concentrating more around the edges where the frame beveled down a bit, but I did add some through the surface just to make it look more cohesive. Before attaching my mirror to my charger, I wanted to add the mirror and the backing back to it. So I'm just using those same screws and I'm putting them back in. Now on the 3rd screw where the hanger was connected to it, I left the hanger off, but I'm going to use that after I get everything put together so that I'll be able to hang this whole thing up on the wall. So once I had all 3 of my screws back on the backing, then I was able to put the 2 pieces together. I'm using a combination of E6000 glue and hot glue because these are plastic pieces and just hot glue alone probably wouldn't hold it. So I concentrated most of the E6000 and the hot glue around the edges where there would be the most contact between the 2 pieces. I just added some dots of the glue around the edge and then hot glue, and I centered it right within my charger. Now, like I said, I hung on to that hanger that came with the mirror, and I'm going to use that on the back side of the charger so that I'll have a way to hang it on the wall. I'm just using some E6000. I put a pretty large dot down. I laid the base of the hanger into the E6000, and then I just used some clear tape to hold that in place until the glue had a chance to dry. My Dollar Tree recently got in these end tables in the plus section. These are $5. They come in a lot of bright colors, but they also come in white too. I grabbed 2 of the white ones because I wanted to create some end tables for out on my porch. I grabbed 2 of the larger round chargers. These are the kind that just have the beaded edge on them. And I'm using some of this Rust-Oleum multicolored texture spray paint. This is specifically made for outdoor things, and it says on it that it adheres to wood and plastic and metal and other things like that. I've never used this spray paint before, but I was really happy with how it turned out. I gave each of my chargers 2 coats, and I made sure that I had the first coat really dry before I applied the second coat. After my paint had a chance to dry, I wanted to permanently attach the charger to the top of the table. You don't have to do this. I just wanted to do it so that it would be easier when I'm storing away the tables for the winter, that it would all be one piece. So I'm using the combination of E6000 and hot glue, and there is a small lip on the bottom of the charger, and that's where I wanted to concentrate most of my glue because that's what would be touching the surface of the table. So I'm just adding a generous amount of E6000 around that lip area, and then I went in with some hot glue and filled in the gaps in between, and then I pressed it onto the top of my table. Now, one other thing I would suggest is if you're going to glue your charger to the top of your table like I did, you might want to set something heavy on it for about 24 hours just so that it's really making a lot of contact with the surface of the table, and the weight of whatever you put on it will make sure that the E6000 has a chance to set and it really adheres down. I get a lot of requests to make decorations for outdoor porches or decks, so I wanted to show you how you could make a quick centerpiece using some of the solar lanterns from the Dollar Tree. I'm using one of the round chargers again. This one's one of the simple ones with just the beading around the outside. And in addition to the lantern, I'm also going to be using a bag of the river rocks that you can find at the Dollar Tree. Keep in mind, you don't have to paint any of these chargers. You can keep them as is because the finish on them is really nice. For this one, I wanted it to have a little bit more texture, so I'm using some chalk paint. And this time, instead of just painting it on with straight brush strokes, I'm using a swirl motion. So I'm just swirling the paint all over the outside edges, and then I went through and I swirled the paint on the inside of the charger also. Then for the second coat, I wanted to blend away some of those bigger brush strokes, but I still wanted to leave some texture. So instead of pouncing up and down this time with my brush, I continued with that swirl motion. And because this is chalk paint, it did leave a good bit of texture on my charger, and you could still see some of those swirls in the plate, which I really like. It kind of reminds me of the swirled plaster that you see in homes. Our home actually has a good bit of the swirled plaster on the walls and the ceiling, so I really like that look. Now keep in mind too, if this is going to be on a deck or an exposed porch, you'll probably want to seal this with a clear coat or a coat of polyacrylic, but I have a covered porch, so I didn't bother adding a clear coat to mine. It's a little hard to see on camera, but after the paint was dry, you could still see some of those swirl marks in my plate. Now for the lantern, these bigger lanterns, check the bottom because this one had an on and off switch even though it is a solar lantern. So I wanted to make sure that mine worked. I did test this out in the store. And then for the river rocks, I went through and gave mine a good rinse because they are pretty dusty in the bag and I wanted to get all of that dust off. So I had rinsed all of these off and let them dry really well. I just added my solar lantern to the center of my plate and then I added the river rock around the outside. The rectangular chargers are great when you need to organize something in your home, but they also work really well to make a quick centerpiece. I started out by giving this one 2 coats of chalk paint. While my paint was drying, I wanted to cut down some craft sticks to place in the bottom. I'm using these larger craft sticks that I get from Walmart, and I showed you there how much bigger they are than the regular craft sticks that you can get at the Dollar Tree. I started by cutting all of these down to 4 1/4 inches. Then I just used some hot glue to start laying them in the bottom of the charger. I wasn't lucky enough this time. By the time I got to the end, there was just a little bit of a gap left, so I did have to cut one of the sticks down lengthwise. But depending on what size craft sticks you're using, if you're using some of the bigger ones or if you're just going to use the regular size, you may not have to cut any of the extra down lengthwise. Also keep in mind, if you don't like the natural wood color, you could paint or stain this, something that coordinates with whatever you decided to paint your tray. I just thought that the natural wood looked really good with the paint color that I chose. I wanted to show off that beaded edge on the tray, so I just took a nail file and I'm running it lightly across the tops of those little beaded edges, and I just rubbed it enough so that some of the paint came off and that silver started to peek through. And then I also filed the edges and the corners down too, just to add a little more texture and interest to this tray. There are a lot of different glass containers at the Dollar Tree that fit really well within these trays, but like I said, I want to turn this into a centerpiece rather than using it for organization. So I grabbed some of these jars that have this really cool iridescent finish to them, but they do have a really pretty bronze top. So if you wanted to use them somewhere else in your home to organize something, you could do that too. You can see here that 3 of these jars fit really well within this tray. So I removed the lids from all 3 of those, but I'll hang on to them in case I need them later. And you can fill these jars however you'd like. You can also decorate the jars if you want to tie some bows or lace, or some jute cord wrapped around them would look cute too. But I decided to keep mine undecorated because I really wanted to show off that iridescent finish. And rather than filling my jars with flowers, I decided to use some of this dried grass that I had on hand. But I have noticed lately at the Dollar Tree that they've started carrying some of this dried grass also. I just cut the stems down to fit in my jars, and this was a really quick and easy centerpiece to put together. The Dollar Tree always has a great selection of solar lights that you can use for outdoor lighting for an evening barbecue, or even if you go camping. I picked up 3 of the smaller lights and they fit really well in the rectangular trays. They also fit really well in the round chargers to make a quick centerpiece. This is something you should also keep in mind for if you have a power outage. Recently here in PA, we had some high winds and we lost power, and it was nice to have the solar lights on hand because they were charged up during the day, and then we were able to bring them inside in the evening for when we needed some extra light while the power was out. I mentioned earlier that a lot of the glass and plastic containers at the Dollar Tree fit really well on the rectangular chargers, and I've used these in my bathrooms for some extra organization. The size of the rectangular trays fits really well on the back of the toilet, and I use one in each of my bathrooms. In one of the bathrooms, I have the tray on the back of the toilet with just a box of tissues and a candle. And in another bathroom, I have a tray and I have little plastic containers that I labeled with cotton balls, cotton rounds, and Q-tips. And like I said, these trays fit really well on the top tank of your toilet. Another way you can use these rectangular chargers for some home organization is to go to the office supply aisle of the Dollar Tree and look for these metal mesh pencil cups. They come in a bunch of different sizes and a couple colors. I grabbed 3 of the jumbo ones in the silver because it matched the silver in the rectangular charger. 3 of them fit really well across the bottom of the charger. And then I was able to add in some of my craft supplies like my scissors, my Cricut tools that I use for when I'm weeding out vinyl, and then in one of the other cups I just put some of my markers. This would also be a good place to organize some makeup or hair accessories, things like that. Anywhere that you need a little bit of extra organization, these rectangular chargers come in handy. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with me again today. Let me know in the comments what kind of plans you have for the summer. All right, everyone, have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.